Imagine this. You are a queen. Not the sparkling tiara kind that waves from carriages and takes selfies with corgis. No, you are the real deal, linen-wrapped, Latin-muttering medieval kind. Your castle is cold, your crown is heavy, and your mornings start not with birdsong, but with a knock from your lady-in-waiting, who always enters with the words, "My lady, it is time." You open your eyes in a room that's both grand and inconvenient. The stone walls are damp, the bed is massive but more decorative than comfortable, and there's a faint smell of beeswax, burning tallow, and whatever the kitchen's failed to keep from smoking. The embroidered canopy above you cost more than some villages make in a year, but there's a draft near your left ear because the tapestries don't quite meet. You sit up. Your linen nightgown is twisted around your legs. Your hair is braided to prevent it from turning into a medieval bird's nest overnight. It sort of worked. Your day starts not with leisure, but with presentation. You will be dressed. Not by yourself, of course, that would be unroyal, but by a squadron of ladies whose job it is to lace, pin, and straighten every layer. Undergarment, shift, kirtle, overgown, sleeves so long they could double as scarves, bodice so tight your lungs file complaints, jewelry like small weapons. The full ensemble weighs about as much as a toddler who's eaten too much bread. Once dressed, it's time for not breakfast. You might get some honeyed oatcake and watered wine, maybe a boiled egg if the cook remembered not to overcook it until it resembles a rock. But no pancakes, no coffee. You're a queen, not a brunch influencer. Next comes Mass, which is less about piety and more about politics. You are watched, always. Your piety must be visible, your posture perfect, your Latin at least mumbled confidently. You kneel until your knees go numb, while mentally organizing what's next. Letters to read, petitions to hear, and whether or not today is the day your cousin tries to poison you with a suspicious tart. And this, dear queen, is just the beginning. As queen, your life is many things. Lavish, yes, but also inconvenient in ways that would make a modern woman throw her goblet across the room. Which, to be fair, you've done. Twice. But only because the goblets are metal and the walls are stone. Nothing breaks. Not even the mood. By late morning, you are seated in what is optimistically called the solar, a room meant to be sunny, which it rarely is, because the one window is the size of a pastry and faces north. Still, it's your domain for reading, sewing, and pretending your joints aren't stiff from last night's drafty feast. A priest drones nearby, reading letters sent by nobles who always seem to want something. Land, titles, pardons, a bishopric for their useless nephew, or simply the honor of saying they correspond with the queen. You listen, nod, and occasionally interrupt with a well-placed, "Tell him I will consider it," which is court speak for never going to happen unless a miracle occurs or he sends better bribes. And oh, the bribes. Not always money. Sometimes it's a tapestry you didn't ask for, or a basket of fruit from a duchess whose orchard is her pride and joy, even though the apples arrive bruised and the pears always smell faintly of goat. Still, you accept them graciously, smile like they're not covered in medieval dust, and make a note to re-gift them at the next diplomatic dinner. Then come the petitions. Actual people, sometimes barefoot, always nervous, ushered in by your steward to kneel before you and beg for justice, land, or mercy. A woman asks for her son to be released from the dungeon after stealing bread. A farmer claims his neighbor's pig keeps eating his turnips. A merchant's wife wants to sue the blacksmith's apprentice for public drunkenness and bad singing. You can't solve every problem, but you listen, and you decide. Because you're not just decorative, you're a figure of authority. And in a world where the king is often off hunting or waging war, or brooding in council chambers with men who use too many Latin words, it's you who manages the quiet chaos. The castle. The people. The image. Some days you write letters yourself. You dictate. Technically, your handwriting is excellent. But a queen doesn't usually get ink on her fingers. You send notes to other noble women. Sometimes these are political moves. Other times, they're gossip in code. You've learned to use polite phrases like, "How charmingly bold of Lady Eglantine to wear blue again," which everyone knows means, "Can someone please tell her she looks like a bruised plum?" Then there's embroidery, not because you love it, though you don't mind, but because it's what's expected. A queen must appear graceful, serene, and modest. And nothing says modest like stabbing cloth with a needle while smiling at courtiers and trying not to think about how boring it is to embroider a scene of St. George slaying a dragon for the 5th time this month. Your ladies-in-waiting chatter nearby. They're young, clever, and sometimes very bad at keeping secrets. You listen, not just for amusement, but for information. Who's in love? Who's in debt? Who's been sneaking out after curfew? You file it all away, because knowledge is power, and power, in your position, is a delicate balancing act. Like walking a tightrope in slippers made of dignity and silent judgment. After your solar session, it's time for a walk, not alone, never alone. You are accompanied by guards, ladies, and the ever-present scent of lavender, someone insists, masks the smell of the stables. You walk in the gardens if the weather allows, or pace the gallery if it doesn't. You nod at servants, check on the progress of the new tapestries, and make sure no one is putting garlic in the queen's roses again. You may visit the kitchens. Not to cook, heavens no, but to appear interested. The cooks bustle around, sweating into their stews, terrified of your opinion. You taste a bit of this, raise an eyebrow at that. Occasionally you suggest a new spice, which will be interpreted as a royal decree. The result may be delicious or disastrous, but you'll smile politely either way and let the steward take the first bite at dinner. Afternoons are often filled with lessons or performances. If you're hosting a visiting noble, you sit through a poetry recital that makes your molars ache. If it's a musician, it's probably a lute, and you pretend it's not the 5th variation of Greensleeves you've heard this week. You clap, smile, and praise generously. Queens are expected to be patrons of the arts, even if the art in question is a grown man singing about his lost cow. And of course there are children, if you have them or are expected to have them. Queens are not merely wives, they are mothers of heirs. Your worth is sometimes measured in healthy sons, and the ability to produce them without fainting too loudly. You supervise their tutors, inspect their manners, and ensure they don't grow up thinking peasants are decorative. If you have no children yet, everyone watches, waits, whispers. Because nothing fuels a medieval court quite like womb speculation. Did you eat enough almonds? Pray to the right saint? Avoid the cursed staircase. Is the king even visiting your bedchamber, or is he still sulking about the last tournament loss? These are the quiet questions you never answer, but always hear. And as the sun starts to fade behind the castle walls, the air cools, and the candles are lit, you prepare for the evening meal, which is a whole ceremony of its own. Don't worry, we'll get to that next. But for now, you straighten your sleeves, take a deep breath, and remember this: you are a queen. You are watched, judged, obeyed, admired, feared, and occasionally pitied. Your life is not easy, not soft, and not your own, but it is yours. And you wear it like a velvet cloak lined with wit and quiet rebellion. Evening is falling. The torches are lit, the corridors smell faintly of smoke and roast meat, and somewhere deep in the kitchen wing, a child is definitely being yelled at for burning the onions again. But none of that concerns you directly. You are a queen, and it is nearly time for supper. Now you might think, finally, relaxation, a quiet meal, a moment to unwind. Not so. Medieval supper is not a meal. It is a performance. And you, madam, are the lead actress. the producer, and the unfortunate one wearing sleeves wide enough to smother a goose. You retreat briefly to your chamber to freshen up, which means dabbing rose water on your wrists, letting someone rebraid your hair for the 4th time today, and changing gowns. Because, obviously, dinner has its own outfit requirements. This new gown is heavier, more embroidered, more bejeweled, and somehow less breathable. You do not so much wear it as endure it. You consider asking for a looser belt, then remember that fashion is pain, and appearances must be maintained. At last, the steward announces that the hall is ready. You process in, because queens do not walk anywhere. They process, accompanied by your ladies, a page or two, and an awkward silence only broken by the echo of shoes on stone. The hall is bright with candlelight, smoky from the hearth, and full of people who are both eager to impress you and mildly terrified of spilling gravy. You take your seat on the raised dais, next to the king if he's present. If not, you sit alone at the high table, with nobles arranged around you according to status, recent behavior, and how well they behaved at the last feast. Lord Edric is still banned from the wine. The food begins to arrive, course after course. Platters and trenchers and dishes in various states of seasoning. Roast pheasant, spiced pears. Bread stuffed with raisins and onion, which should not work but somehow does. There's a fish shaped like a castle, and a jelly molded to resemble a swan. You take polite bites, smile gracefully, and make mental notes for the kitchen. Do you get to eat everything? No, not even close. Most of the food is there for display, or for the guests, or for the hounds, who get whatever the noble children sneak to them. Some dishes are oddly cold, some suspiciously hot, and one you suspect was resurrected from last week's leftovers. You eat just enough to be seen eating, then signal for the next course with a nod that's been rehearsed over years. The wine flows freely. Diluted for the ladies, strong for the knights, and always served with the hopeful air that no one will say anything political after the 3rd cup. That hope is often in vain. Conversation, of course, is an art. You must smile at things that are not funny, pretend interest in subjects you'd rather forget, and steer topics gently away from scandal, war, and your husband's latest attempt at falconry, which ended, notably, with a missing glove and one angry goose. Music plays. A lute, a flute, maybe a small choir of boys who have been bribed with honey cakes to sing sweetly and not fidget. You offer them a smile, which is recorded mentally as a great honor they'll boast about for years. One of the minstrels begins a song about courtly love, dramatic, rhyming, and wildly inaccurate about actual marriage. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Queens do not roll their eyes. They inhale thoughtfully. Sometimes entertainers are brought in, jugglers, dancers, or a man who once famously trained a squirrel to fetch coins. You applauded that one sincerely. You do love a clever squirrel. As the meal winds down, dessert is offered. Candied nuts, marzipan shaped like hedgehogs. Why? And a strange new delicacy called sugar plate, a molded treat that looks like food but is, in fact, pure sugar and teeth regret. You nibble politely and consider your escape plan, because here's the truth. You are tired. You've sat for hours, smiled for miles, and worn enough silk to upholster a cathedral pew. But you cannot simply excuse yourself. There is protocol. First, a toast, then a prayer, then polite withdrawal with enough grace to remind everyone that you are royal but mortal. Finally, back in your chamber, the gown is peeled off by your ladies with the care usually reserved for archaeological digs. Your skin exhales, your shoulders droop, and you are once again human, beneath the weight of cloth and expectation. But your day is not over yet. Because as queen, your duties extend into the private hours as well. The evening still holds rituals, some sacred, some strategic, and some deeply personal. We'll step into that candlelit world next. So now you're back in your chamber. The feast is over. The courtiers are drunk on wine and flattery. The dogs have eaten better than most peasants. The minstrels have packed up their lutes, and the fire in the great hall is dying down to embers. You'd think this would be the time when, as queen, you finally get to breathe, to loosen your bodice, sip a warm drink, and maybe, just maybe, enjoy a moment of peace in your own skin. But not quite, because even in the middle of the night, there is still protocol. First, your ladies. They bustle around you like bees in silk, helping you out of your gown, one pin at a time. The laces are tight. The sleeves must be unhooked. Your chemise, slightly sweat-dampened, clings to you like a second, scratchier skin. The corset? A cage with embroidery. The shoes? Cute but cruel. As they undress you, they do not gossip. Not now. This is the quiet hour, when even chatter feels too loud. You thank them, because you are not a cruel queen. And because you know they'll be the ones to wake before you tomorrow, relighting the fire, brushing your cloaks, preparing the rose water again. When the last layer is removed, you're left in a simple linen shift, the medieval equivalent of pajamas. It's scratchy, clean-ish, and stiff from being dried by firelight. You climb into your bed, which is enormous but not soft. Feather mattresses are prized and lumpy. The sheets are linen, crisp and cold. You pull the heavy coverlet over your legs, knowing it weighs more than a small pig. And just as you start to think you're alone, there's a knock at the chamber door. It's not unexpected. It never is. Because being queen also means being wife, whether or not you share affection with the king, whether or not you feel like discussing the finer points of dynastic succession at midnight. He may visit. Sometimes he stays long. Sometimes not. Sometimes he talks about the falcons again. Sometimes he talks about heirs. In the medieval world, your bedroom is not entirely yours. There are witnesses. Not to the act itself, thankfully, no, but to the comings and goings. A lady records when the king visits. A servant knows how long he stayed. It's all noted in case of pregnancy, inheritance, or scandal. Because your womb is, essentially, national infrastructure. If there is no heir, the whispers grow louder. Is the queen barren? Is the king disinterested? Is God angry? Is someone cursed? Even when you are alone, you are not. Your body carries the hopes of dynasties. Every headache, every missed appetite, every suspicious nap is cause for palace-wide speculation. So if the king does visit, you perform. Not just affection, though you might feel it, some nights, but diplomacy. You ask about his counsel, the trade routes, the ambassador from Navarre with the shiny shoes. You listen, nod, and offer a well-timed smile. Your job is not merely to be loved, it is to be agreeable. And, if he doesn't visit, that is in some ways a different kind of performance. A carefully choreographed version of absence. No one dares mention it openly, of course, but eyes narrow. Ladies murmur, and the bishop always seems to recommend more prayer. Eventually, you are alone. The fire crackles. The room flickers gold and shadow. The castle creaks, stones settling, mice rustling, some unfortunate guard dropping his spear outside your window. You try to sleep. But sleep is a slippery thing. Your mind replays every word from dinner, every glance from Lady Maud, every letter read this morning. Are the harvests really that bad in the East? Did Lord Daring mean that comment about falcons being easily distracted by shiny things? Was that a metaphor? You pull the covers tighter. The bed is too large, too stiff, and strangely lopsided since the carpenter repaired the leg last month. You remind yourself to summon him again. Eventually you drift. But it's not the soft descent into dream you hoped for. In the medieval world, sleep comes in two parts. First sleep, and then, after a few hours, the watch. That strange twilight of wakefulness, when the body stirs and the mind slips into clarity. You lie there, half awake, staring at the canopy overhead. This is the time when you pray. Not loudly, not with ceremony, just softly, in the quiet dark, in case God is listening. You pray for peace, for safety, for your children or the ones you hope to have, for the king, for your country, and, if you're honest, for just 1 week without someone poisoning the soup or misplacing the royal seal again. After your prayers, you might light a candle. You read, or write, or simply sit. The servants are asleep. The halls are still. It is the only time you are just a woman. No crown, no court, just thoughts. And eventually, the second sleep comes. Dawn waits on the other side. And so does the next day of ruling, reigning, smiling, judging, surviving. Because you are a queen. And sleep is not escape, it's intermission. Sleep eventually comes, not as a gift, but as a compromise. A few hours of soft forgetfulness, tangled in dreams stitched together from fragments of the day. A flash of silver embroidery. A child laughing, a face you haven't seen in years. Blurred by memory and time. A voice that whispers something important, right before you wake. The morning is not loud. It's worse. It's deliberate. There's the rustle of your ladies preparing your robes. The soft creak of a door opening to admit a maid with a basin of cold water. A gentle cough from the corner where a priest waits with news, letters, or scripture, depending on the urgency of the day. You don't rise immediately. For a moment, you just lie still beneath the canopy, staring up at the ceiling's wooden beams, counting them like stars. You think about the dream, about the voice, about how it felt, for a moment, to not be queen. You wonder, what if you weren't? What if you had been born the second daughter, or into a merchant's family in Bordeaux? Or as a kitchen maid with no duties beyond peeling onions and avoiding the steward's temper? But no, you were born with expectations, groomed for this. Coached in diplomacy before you had a full set of teeth. Married off before you'd memorized all the saints. You were raised to rule, or rather to support a ruler, and occasionally remind him not to embarrass himself with wine or war. You sit up, and the illusion ends. Because the day begins whether you want it to or not. Your ladies help you dress. Today's gown is a dark green velvet, embroidered with tiny golden vines. It smells faintly of cedar from the chest it was stored in. As they lace you up, one of them remarks that the weather is turning. A storm is likely. You nod as though weather and fate weren't already tangled in the same skein. A small mirror is held up for you. Polished metal, not glass, but enough to glimpse the woman you are today. The lines around your eyes, the tiredness tucked behind the poise, the same face you've worn through peace and plague, childbirth and banquet, the face of a queen, carved by years and expectations. You wonder, do the people love you? You know they fear you, respect you, perform for you. But love? It's a dangerous word. Easier to admire a queen from a tapestry than to know the woman beneath the crown. They write songs about your grace, not your sleepless nights. They toast your beauty, not your boredom. They mention your name when crops are good, and curse it when they're not. Still, you do your duty. You sign charters. You settle disputes. You smile at children, even when your own are sick, distant, or just strangers in royal clothing. You remember birthdays, your children's, your husband's, even your steward's, because someone has to. You remember every insult disguised as flattery, every false apology wrapped in a gift basket of pears. And sometimes, when no one is watching, you remember who you were before the crown. Do you regret it? Sometimes, quietly, you regret nothing loud, no wild mistake, no scandal. Just small things, a letter you didn't send, a friendship you let drift into silence, a moment when you might have said no, but said nothing instead. But you also carry pride. Not the shallow kind embroidered onto a banner, but the deeper sort that grows in the cracks. You have held this kingdom together through harsh winters, poor harvests, and a husband who sometimes thinks diplomacy is a sword fight with wine. You have calmed rebellions, not with troops, but with letters and logic. You have soothed foreign queens who feared your armies. You have survived, and survival in this world is no small victory. Later, you'll hold court. Again, there will be gossip. There always is. Someone's pregnant. Someone's plotting. Someone fell into the moat. You'll manage it with a raised brow and a strategic silence. Later, you'll counsel your daughter on how to be pleasant without being pliable. You'll tell her the truth about power. It's not about noise. It's about knowing when to listen, when to speak, and when to let others think it was their idea all along. Later, you'll visit the chapel and pray, not because you doubt yourself, but because you've learned humility from history. So many queens before you, so many after. But for now, in this quiet sliver of morning, you are just a woman, breathing, remembering, preparing to rise again. Because the crown is not something you wear, it's something you become. And you wear it even in dreams. You might think being queen means staying in a castle, safe behind thick walls and surrounded by swans, tapestries, and the occasional nervous noble with a report on wheat taxes. And yes, much of your life is stone and ceremony, but sometimes, you are required to leave. Today is one of those days. The court is going on progress. A grand, rolling procession through towns, villages, and countryside, designed to show the people that their queen is not just a name on coins or a prayer in church, but a living, breathing figure. Hopefully with good posture. You are dressed early. The gown for travel is less cumbersome, lighter, with less embroidery, but still stately. A wool cloak lined with fur, a brooch that won't come undone mid-horseback ride. You've learned from that particular disaster. Gloves that are more symbolic than warm. And, of course, the veil and crown. Lighter than the heavy coronation diadem, but still enough to pinch. You do not ride alone. Your entourage is long. Ladies in waiting. Guards in gleaming mail, priests muttering blessings, pages running back and forth like anxious squirrels. Your steward counts baggage. Your chaplain rereads the psalter. Somewhere behind you, someone is complaining about the saddles, the roads, the weather, or all three. And the people? Ah, yes. The people line the roads. They wave. They cheer. They scatter petals if the budget allows. Children hold their mothers' hands, squinting at the velvet figure atop the white horse. You smile at them, softly, serenely. The queen's smile, the one you've practiced. Not too wide, not too solemn, just enough to look holy, approachable, and vaguely miraculous. They whisper, "That's her, that's the queen. She's smaller than I thought, taller, prettier, paler, not as pale. Her teeth look strong, her skin looks tired. Is that a real pearl?" You hear none of this directly, of course, but you know. You always know. A queen is a mirror that reflects 1,000 expectations. Some see a saint. Some see a villain. Some just want to know what fabric you're wearing and if they could copy it for their niece's wedding. Along the route, you stop at abbeys, manors, and towns that try very hard to impress you. The mayor of one village offers you a goose in a ribbon. You accept it with grace and pass it to a servant, who is now stuck holding a very confused goose for the rest of the afternoon. Another town recites a poem. It rhymes. Badly. You smile anyway. At one stop, you visit a shrine. This is no performance. Here, you kneel before a gilded altar, light a candle, and whisper a prayer. For your children, for peace, for guidance, for something that feels very personal and not at all queenly. The villagers watch. Some make the sign of the cross. Others murmur about how devout you are. A few just want to see if your crown falls off when you bow your head. You return to your horse and continue on. And then comes the unexpected, rain. It arrives not gently, but in the way it always does when you're wearing wool, furious, sideways, and accompanied by wind that smells faintly of manure. Your ladies squeal, the pages panic, the steward shouts about covering the baggage, the horses get twitchy. You, the queen, do not flinch. You sit, soaked and stony, like a saint carved out of wet limestone. Because queens do not complain about rain. They endure it. They let the storm remind people that royalty is not just silk and jewels. It is fortitude. It is patience. It is sitting through a squall without looking like a drowned hen. By the time you arrive at the manor house where you're staying the night, your underdress is damp, your hair is curling in strange directions, and your boots squish slightly. But you dismount with dignity, thank the host, and step inside with the composure of someone who has not spent 6 hours pretending not to be mildly hypothermic. Your chamber here is smaller than the one at court. The fire is weak. The bed smells faintly of rosemary and ambition. You remove your damp cloak, accept the hot wine, and prepare yourself for another round of polite nodding, strategic small talk, and vague smiles over undercooked turnips. Tomorrow, there will be more travel, more waving, more listening to someone explain their village's cheese-making process with aggressive enthusiasm. And you will do it all again. Because you are not just the queen of the castle, you are queen of the kingdom, and the kingdom expects to see you, smiling, nodding, damp, but dignified. Here's something the poets rarely mention. A queen doesn't need a sword. She has something far more terrifying. A memory. Yours is long, deep, and ruthlessly organized. You remember faces, names, titles, marriages, inheritances, and, most importantly, debts. Not the coin kind, though those are useful. No. You track the unspoken debts, the favor unreturned, the insult, thinly disguised, the alliance offered with a smile too wide. This, dear queen, is your true battlefield. Because while the king rides to war in armor that squeaks when he turns too quickly, you are seated in chambers full of candles and courtiers, waging a war of glances, words, and decisions that seem effortless. Take today. There's a nobleman visiting from the east, Lord Gobert, wealthy, recently widowed. No one quite remembers how. His lands are valuable, his loyalty uncertain. He's come to court not just to pay respects, but to look, to see if the court is divided, to test the temperature of the crown, and possibly to ask for a marriage alliance. He expects to meet the king. Instead, he meets you. You welcome him graciously. You compliment his cloak, though you notice it's lined with sable, not marten, which means he's richer than he pretends. He kisses your ring with a flourish. You allow it. Barely. You invite him to dine. Not at the high table. Not yet. A seat to your right. Visible, flattering, but not presumptuous. You ask him about his lands, his vassals, his vineyards. He answers. Too quickly. You ask nothing about his wife. His eyes flick. You notice. Later, in the solar, you instruct your steward to investigate his grain yields. You have a feeling he's not here to pledge loyalty. He's here to buy it. You file that away. Tomorrow, you'll mention it casually to the Chancellor. No accusation, just a gentle, Lord Gobert's trade figures don't match his tribute records. The Chancellor will nod, quietly. The investigation will begin, and Lord Gobert will never know that the smile you gave him at dinner was the first blow in a very long, very polite war. This is your skill. You never threaten, you suggest. You never argue, you pause meaningfully. You don't scream, you wait. There is power in your silences. When you say nothing at all, people fill in the blanks with their own fears. When you praise someone's child in public, you're confirming their place. When you ask how someone's mother is feeling after the illness 3 winters ago, you're reminding them, I see you, I remember. And they remember too. They remember the queen who helped their daughter get placed in a wealthy household. The queen who vouched for their cousin's marriage contract. The queen who ensured the harvest tax was light in their district after the frost. They owe you, in small, silent, lifelong ways. You never say you owe me, you say, I'm glad I could help. And they say anything you need, your grace, and someday you will. That's how you build a kingdom. Not from castles and keeps, but from people. From goodwill and obligation. From dinner invitations and godparent choices. From remembering who likes honey in their wine, and who once cried when their falcon flew away. Even the king does not always see it, but you do. You see everything. Like Lady Isabel's sudden interest in the young knight from Aquitaine. He's handsome, unmarried, and unaware of the dowry disaster attached to her name. Like the monk who always seems to be writing letters at odd hours, despite claiming a vow of silence. You've read one. It was poetry. Mediocre, but treason adjacent. Like the servant girl who's too quiet, too clever, and currently employed in the chamber of a lord who has too much interest in where the court is moving next. You never confront. Not immediately. You watch, you gather, and then, when the time is right, you act, sometimes with a word, sometimes with an invitation that is never sent, sometimes with a wedding proposal, arranged carefully between 3 families, that solves a crisis before it ever becomes public. That is your power. And no one applauds it. There are no songs for a queen who notices everything and says very little. No ballads about seating arrangements or the strategic use of how curious over dinner. But it is power, and you wield it beautifully. Legacy. It's a heavy word, isn't it? It clings to you like the scent of incense after chapel. Faint at first, but impossible to shake. And as queen, it is not merely a thought for old age. It is a companion that walks beside you, even when you are young. Because the truth is, your life is being recorded. Not by scribes, not yet, but by glances, by whispers, by servants who remember how you reacted when the bread was burned or when your son fell ill. Every gesture is a seed. And in the strange garden of time, some will grow into myths, and you wonder, what will they say about you? Will they call you wise? Will they praise your beauty, your diplomacy, your charity? Or will they reduce you to a footnote beneath your husband's reign, a name linked only to childbirth and embroidery? You've read the chronicles. Queens are often remembered in half sentences. She was devout. She bore 3 sons. She died quietly. Not you. You want more than that. So you begin, slowly, subtly, to shape the version of yourself that history will find. First, the letters. You write them carefully. Some are private, sent to your children, your sisters, your nieces, filled with advice and affection, prayers and recipes, recommendations and quiet warnings. But others are public. Letters to abbesses, to foreign queens, to influential noblewomen who will keep your words, copy them, quote them, letters that show your mind as much as your manners. They will survive you. Then, there's your patronage. You choose a monastery to rebuild. Not a large one, not too grand, but a quiet place where the poor are fed and the sick are comforted. You commission a chapel, with your name carved discreetly into the foundation stone. You endow a hospital, a school for girls. Nothing scandalous, just ambitious enough to raise eyebrows and expectations. These are not just gifts, they are claims. Stakes in the future, proof that you existed beyond your titles and your gowns. You oversee the creation of a psalter, a book of prayers, handwritten by monks, illuminated with gold leaf and tiny, strange drawings in the margins. A goose playing a harp for some reason. But on the front page, delicately, is your portrait. You looking not as you do now, but as you want to be remembered, serene, intelligent, with a crown tilted just so. They'll say, it flatters you. But that's the point. You are not just living, you are curating. Even your clothing plays a part. You commission a particular shade of blue. Deep, rich, almost violet, rare, expensive. Soon, noble women begin asking for it. The dyers name it Raina's Blue. And just like that, your legacy is stitched into fashion. Your children, too, carry fragments of you. You train your daughters to speak with care, to walk with pride, to know the names of saints and the laws of inheritance. You teach your sons that strength lies not just in battle, but in patience, and in choosing advisors who won't steal from them while complimenting their boots. You tell them stories, not of dragons and saints, but of real women, queens who ruled wisely, widows who negotiated peace treaties, nuns who wrote books. You name them out loud, because forgetting is a kind of death. And you are determined to be remembered by more than your womb. And still, some nights, the weight of it all presses down. You lie in bed and wonder if it's enough, if the stone will hold, if the ink will fade, if, one day, some bored monk will reduce your life to a sigh and a sentence. You think about the women who came before you, strong, clever, unseen. You think about their whispers, their warnings. You wonder if they watch you now, from some place beyond time, nodding as you sign another decree, arrange another marriage, correct another monk who thinks your Latin is charming for a woman. You are their continuation, and you are the beginning of something too, because history may try to flatten you, but you are already carving your name into the walls. You are older now, not old, exactly, though some would call you that with a patronizing tilt of the head and a suddenly louder voice, as if your hearing has aged faster than your spine. But you know the truth. You're not fading. You're distilling. The mirror shows a face with lines, yes, but they're not cracks. They're etchings, notes in the margins of a well-read book. The corners of your eyes hold stories. Your hands, a few quiet tremors. But your mind, as sharp as the embroidery needle you no longer care to wield. Your chambers are warmer these days. Not because the fire burns brighter, but because age brings a certain insulation, a layer of authority, of let her be, of fewer people daring to tell you what to do. There are perks to being an older queen. You can eat slowly, say less, people listen harder. But with the quiet comes reckoning. You wake earlier now, not with dread, but with memory. Your dreams are longer, sometimes gentler, sometimes crowded. Old friends appear, children, younger than they are now. A girl you once were, running barefoot through a walled garden, not yet corseted by duty. You've buried people. You've mourned in public, in black veils and rigid posture. You've mourned in private, in linen nightclothes, curled on your side as the fire died and no one dared to enter. You've learned that grief softens with time, but never really goes away. It simply changes shape, like old wool, shrunken, misshapen, but still warm. Your body has changed. The stairs are steeper, the wind colder, your appetite smaller. but you've made peace with it. There's dignity in slowness. Besides, your mind still gallops. You still rule in your own way. The king may be gone, or fading, or listening more to priests than sense. Your children are grown, ruling lands of their own, or bickering over titles, or writing you letters that try to sound like they're not asking for money. You still attend council meetings. You sit at the side, hands folded, face serene. When you speak, it is quiet, intentional, and everyone hushes. Because you are no longer feared, you are revered. And perhaps that is the better power. No one calls you, Your Grace, with the same nerves they once had. Now they say it with softness, sometimes even with affection. You have outlived rivals, outlasted fashions. You've gone from feared to respected, a transformation few in your world survive long enough to enjoy. There are more books in your chamber now, psalters, histories, letters you've kept for too long. Some you reread, some you never open, because you know exactly what they say. There is one from your daughter, written the year she gave birth to her first child. It's stained with ink and something else. Possibly tears, possibly wine. You've never asked. You still dress, of course, but the gowns are simpler, the jewels smaller, the crown lighter. Not literally, it still pinches, but you wear it with a familiarity now, like an old ache in the shoulder. It's no longer a symbol. It's simply yours. Sometimes the younger women come to you. They ask for advice about marriage, about diplomacy, about how to host a feast without accidentally inviting 3 enemies to the same table. You answer gently. You tell them what you've learned, that silence is often louder than words, and that kindness, when used with intent, is sharper than steel. You do not pretend it was easy. You do not pretend you were always right. But you let them see that you are still here, because that, too, is part of your legacy. Survival, not as an accident, but as a skill, a talent even. A craft honed through decades of watching, weighing, waiting. The younger courtiers now describe you with words like majestic and timeless, which is court language for still powerful, but in a way that makes us feel slightly uncomfortable. You rather enjoy it. And so you go on, slowly, softly, still. You walk in the garden when weather allows. You sit by the chapel window and let the light touch your hands. You listen to music. Real music, not the court's endless lute competitions. You even smile at the memory of the squirrel that once stole a bishop's pastry during a feast. You never told anyone it was you who left the pastry there on purpose. And when night comes, you sleep longer. You dream of old halls, old laughter, of triumphs and mistakes, of names long forgotten by the world but carved into your bones. You are not forgotten. You are remembered. And not just because your face is stitched into tapestries or pressed into coins, but because you lived well, ruled wisely, loved fiercely when you could. You are the queen. Still, in time, the world softens around you, not because it has grown gentler, but because you have grown apart from it, not in bitterness, not even in sadness, just in pace. The court spins on. The petitions keep coming. The young knights still polish their armor too much and speak too loudly. The same arguments about taxes, borders, and bans of marriage circle through the halls like drafts in winter. You still listen, but you don't answer as often, not because you don't know what to say, but because you've learned when it's better to let others find the answer themselves. You've become a mirror for them now. A sounding board. A living reminder of what wisdom looks like when it's weathered. And so your days pass gently. The candles are lit earlier. The windows stay closed longer. The gowns grow lighter, easier to bear. You sit more than you stand. You speak softly, but when you do, the room still stills. You think of those who once stood at your side, long gone. of those you raised, those you buried, those who only knew you as a name on a banner. Your grandchildren visit. Some are shy, nervous around the crown. Others are bold, climbing into your lap, asking why your hands look like tree bark. You laugh. You tell them it's because trees and queens both grow slowly and carry more rings than anyone sees. One asks if you were ever afraid. You answer, "Of course." That's how I knew I was paying attention. You walk the garden path one more time. The lavender still grows wild by the wall. The hawthorn tree is taller than you remember. The stone bench where you once wept behind your veil is still cracked in the same place. And as you sit, the breeze carries birdsong, the distant clatter of hooves, and laughter from the courtyard. The kingdom lives on. It moves, breathes, grumbles, rejoices. It does not stop. But that's not your burden anymore. In the quiet of your chamber, you prepare. Not with dread, not with drama. You've always hated drama. You tell your ladies to stop weeping. You ask for the chapel bell not to toll too early. You write one final letter, not to a king or a bishop, but to a girl you once were. You thank her for being brave, for holding the line, for daring to wear the crown not just as duty but as choice. The priests whisper prayers. The room fills with candlelight. And in that last moment, as your breath slows and your fingers curl softly over the embroidered edge of your coverlet, you realize something unexpected. You are not afraid. You are not alone. You are not gone. Because you've left pieces of yourself everywhere. In books, in buildings, in customs, in daughters and sons, and the way women hold themselves a little straighter when they remember your name. And that is the true magic of queenship. You reigned, you endured, you were seen, and now you are story. Some time has passed. Your name is no longer spoken daily in the halls of the castle. The servants no longer curtsy when passing your chambers. The fire that once warmed your favorite solar has gone out, replaced by fresh logs and a younger queen with different tastes in tapestries. But you remain, not in body, but in memory. You are remembered in strange ways. A child in the village wears a blue ribbon in her hair and says it's the queen's color. A monk tells a story about the time you stopped a war with only a letter. He gets the details wrong, of course. Your penmanship was much better than he says, but the spirit of the tale survives. Bards sing of you now, in smoky halls and bustling markets. Their versions of your life are enthusiastic. You're taller, more beautiful, witty in 12 languages. A warrior in one tale, a healer in another. One particularly romantic version claims you walked barefoot through a snowstorm to save your kingdom with a kiss. You absolutely did not. But you don't mind, because this is how queens become legends. Not through perfect records, but through retelling, through candles lit on feast days, through the statue in the Abbey garden where young women go to pray for wisdom, strength, or simply for patience with their brothers. Your name is stitched into tapestries. It is carved into chapel beams. It is spoken in oaths and ballads, not always accurately, but always fondly. And in that way, you remain present. There is a girl, perhaps your great-granddaughter, perhaps a distant noble child, who reads about you in a book. She sees your portrait, faded and idealized, but still recognizably you. She asks her tutor about you. And when he says she was a queen, the girl replies, she was more than that. And that's it. That's your immortality. You're not just a crown on a coin. You're not just a name in a chronicle. You are story, alive in memory, carried by generations who never met you but feel you all the same. You once ruled with care, with cleverness, with grace sharpened like a dagger beneath silk. Now you rule in imagination. And for a queen, that is the longest reign of all. The dream fades slowly. Not all at once, like a candle blown out, But gradually, like twilight yielding to dawn, you feel the weight of the crown lift, not with a clatter, but with a soft sigh. The stone walls dissolve, the tapestries go quiet, the smell of beeswax and lavender drifts away. The laced gowns loosen, the fur-lined cloaks slip from your shoulders like a story ending mid-sentence, and you wake, back in your bed, back in your time. No rustling ladies in waiting, no court to attend, no petitions to review, no throne, no scrolls, no distant murmurs of politics spoken in Latin behind your back. Just the quiet hum of the present, the steady breath of the here and now. But something lingers, doesn't it? A trace of that other life. A memory that isn't quite yours, but feels like it could have been. A sense of having once stood straighter, spoken slower, listened better, ruled, if only in your mind. And that's the thing about history. It lives not just in books and ruins, but in you, in the stories you carry, in the way you sit when you feel strong, in the way you watch people when you're deciding what not to say, in the quiet moments when your mind is half asleep but your heart is wide awake. Maybe you're not a queen with land and lineage, but you still hold court over your choices, your time, your voice, your thoughts, your boundaries. You rule something no less important than a kingdom. You rule yourself, and that, in its own way, is the oldest kind of royalty. So rest now. The crown, for tonight, is set gently on the shelf. And you are remembered. You are imagined. You are queen. Even if just in dreams.